Thank you, Mark. Thank you, everyone. I'm Vardhani Bhaskaran. I'm a technical account manager with Acumatica, and today I'll take you through some of the tips and tricks that we use with Postman. So, earlier we saw Samuel, my colleague, presenting about web services. So, it is highly impossible to talk about web services without touching upon Postman because that's the go to tool for testing any API. So, the three major features that we want to look into are variables, testing, collection runner, and at last we'll look into some of the useful shortcuts that we use day to day. So without further ado, let me go into the first section, variables and environments. So we did see Samuel using variables on some of the Postman calls that he was running. It'll be nice to look into why we need it, what is it, and if not, what will be the disadvantages of not using these features. So variables, it is in any application we do have property files like saving redundant information, so that it allows us to for easy modification and simplify sharing and deploying in multiple places. So this can be achieved with Postman testing as well. So for this, let me go into the Postman itself. So imagine if we are sharing a collection with our partners or with you. The first one, the collection without variables. So as we saw earlier, we'll be able to log into Acumatica. In here, if you see it, the first call is targeted towards a local host environment, that is my personal local host, and into the 22R106 Acumatica instance. This is the naming which I gave for my instance. If I share this instance with you, and if there are multiple calls with all the examples that Samuel shared, you'll have to copy paste the same, rename the instance and the server name in all these places. Here it is 7. Imagine if it's hundreds of APIs. So if we were to use variables, it will be very easy to modify the name once and see it reflect everywhere else. For example, here site URL is a variable, and the current value of the site URL is localhost, localhost slash 22, and my Acumatica instance name. So it is as long as a word is encompassed within two curly braces, Postman recognizes that it is a variable and it is encoded somewhere. So let's see where it is encoded. So there are two types of variables: one, environment dependent, and environment independent. Let me just show where the environment independent is. So here, as a part of this collection, we can create variables which cannot be modified based on the environment. For example, save data is a variable which is not based on the environment. So we did talk a lot about environment. So what do we mean by environment is, imagine if you have UAT, prod, and dev. So we use the same APIs everywhere. We cannot maintain three different collection or three different workspaces for each of these APIs. And in order to maintain consistency, we'll have to copy paste whatever we do between the three. So it will be easy to use the same APIs, but just modify the environment. Here I have two environments, UAT and dev. So there is an environment sections with Postman. If you just go into it and just click on the plus icon, you'll be able to create as many environments as needed. And here for the dev and UAT environment, I have environment dependent variables. For example, we saw the site URL earlier, that is encoded here. The initial value is this, and the current value is also the same now. So that is localhost 22R106, which is the one which I have used in all these API calls to make sure that I'll be able to modify the instance name very easily. So let me go back to environment and show in the UAT, we do have a different test environment like ISV test, and in that test environment, I'm running a different instance with VB, Netstock, etc. So this, as long as I change the environment in the while making the call, like in the login call, as long as I change the environment, I'll be able to change it everywhere here, and I'll be able to send the call. So let's now stick to the dev environment and make the call. So I hope environments and variables were clear, and the usefulness was clear as well. Going back to the presentation. So testing. So it is best to maintain consistency across multiple sites. So for that, we'll have to ensure each and every time when we make a call that each and every time when we try to make a call, we make sure that it is consistent across multiple sites. So for that, testing in Postman is highly helpful. There are multiple built-in tests which we can use, and it is built into, it is automatic it is automatically run with each and every API call. For example, let me go back to Postman for this. So here, under the tests tab of this login call, we are testing whether the response is having status 204. Let me just make this call, and we can see the status is 204, and the test result says the test is passed. In case if the result has been something else, from 200 or 5 or 402 error or anything, it will fail, and we'll be able to know that the login has failed, and we can switch to multiple environments like we saw earlier and test for multiple statuses, and not just status codes. We will even be able to check values based on the response that we get. For example, in this get vendor with main contact call, I'm testing whether the response contact's main contact display name is go to vendor inc. Why we need with Acumatica, we do share the sales demo data. So with that, we'll be able to test for each and every standard values. For example, for this vendor, AA vendor, we can test the display name's main contact is go to vendor, and the test result is passed. Similarly, we can even check for actions, if a call has been removed from hold, we'll be able to test whether the status is 200, and also if a certain value is false. Here we are testing the whole Boolean value is false or not. So this way we'll be able to maintain consistency and test for various features, like we can create a bill and check for the value of the bill that we created. I hope testing was clear. Let me go back to the presentation for the next section on the last feature that we have, that is collection runner. So uh, uh, collection runners are, so we did see that we share APIs or sample of APIs with collections. So it is, imagine when we have hundreds of APIs, it is impossible to test each and every call individually. So it is best to run all the APIs together with a single click. So collection runner helps us to achieve that, and it can also run these tests sequentially, so that we'll be able to test our entire workflow. For example, imagine when we have to like create a bill and we have to like release the same bill, we'll be able to get the response value from the create bill call and use that data in for the next call. For this, let me go back to Postman again. So here, there is a create bill call. Here, I'm like creating a bill, and after that I'll be using in the remove hold action, I'm using the data from the create bill and using it in the remove hold from bill call. And again, I'll be using the same data in the release bill call as well, so that we'll be able to test the entire workflow of the bill screen. So for that, the main or important action to be done is to use environmental variables. For example, here I'm from the response data of this create bill call, like for I hope the put call, like from the earlier web services session, you'll know that when you call the put call with all the details for this bill endpoint, you'll be able to create a bill. After this bill has been created, under the test tab, this is simple. The test is simple JavaScript. You can write it easily. So we are setting the bill reference ID variable name to the response JSON's ID value. Like we are getting the response body, assigning it to the JSON data variable, And from the JSON data variable, we'll be able to get the response ID. You can see that this is BF58 different hash. We are assigning it to the bill reference ID. Now, if I go to remove from whole bill and hover over this reference bill ID, we can see that this is the value that is being sent. Let me just make that call. Yeah. So the same value is sent in order to remove the whole, and the same way release bill also happens. So it is very easy to run collections. You can just click on the three dots beside the collection and just click on run collection, and we can even choose any specific set of API calls to run. For example, if we want to test only the bill collection, we can eliminate the other calls which are not needed. For example, the top 5 vendor call, I don't need it right now, so I'm just unselecting it. We can even have delays between the calls. For example, we'll have to wait until the bill create is completed in order to use it in the remove hold, right? So we can add a delay of for example, let me add 100 milliseconds just for test. And we can even save responses this way. Let me run the collection. Yeah. So when you run the collection, it not just makes the call, it will also run the tests as well, and it will show us the test results. Here you can see the on the post login, on the login call, we tested whether the status was 200, that is done, and then we did check for the main contact name, that is also done, and we created a bill, and then use that bill to create the remove hold, and then use the same bill to release the bill, and then at last we logged out. So the entire process is done, and we can view the summary and see what are all tests passed. Here everything passed, and if there are any failures, that will also be explicit. So that's the most helpful part of Postman, where we'll be able to run everything in a single click. So mm, that's related to collection runner. We'll be able to see we saw the summary earlier. And last but not least, I am extremely shortcut impaired, but we do find a lot of our partners and our colleagues find these shortcuts useful, especially the zoom in and zoom out option when we are presenting. That's highly helpful. And also the last one, the collapse JSON and expand JSON. This is helpful when we are working with an array of objects, like an array of JSON objects. If you want to collapse a particular JSON and expand it, these shortcuts like Alt 0, Alt Shift 0 helps us in um, helps us in doing all these activities quickly. So that's related to shortcuts. And the workspace that I showed earlier is on a public workspace, on a public workspace on Postman. And using this link without even a Postman account, you'll be able to view these samples and use it for reference. And thank you all for listening in. And with that, I'll hand it off to Ruchika for Acumatica specific tools, which will help us create embedded solutions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Vartini and Mark. Hello, everyone. My name is Ruchika Sharma, and I'm a technical account manager at Acumatica. Today, I'll talk about some inbuilt Acumatica tools facilitated for developing, troubleshooting, and maintaining system health. So it will be a nice refresher for those who already work with Acumatica, and for those who have just started to learn, it will be a good introduction to some of the most widely used tools inside Acumatica. So I've divided the session into two parts. In the first part, we'll focus on Acumatica debugging tools like the Element Inspector, DAC Schema Browser, Source Code Explorer, and the Trace window. And in the second part, we'll have a look at some inbuilt Acumatica tools which can be used to monitor performance. We'll touch on 4 screens, which is License Monitoring Console, Request Profiler, System Monitor, and System Queues Monitor. So let's get started and begin with Acumatica debugging tools. The first tool which I want to talk about is the Element Inspector. So Element Inspector is primarily used for 2 purposes. The first one is that it can be used to view information of any visual elements on the screen. And the second purpose is that it is used to start customizing that particular element which you just inspected. So let's see this in action to understand it better. Okay, so for example, if I want to inspect customer field on my sales order form, you can click on customization and then select inspect element, or else you can use the shortcut. You can press Control Alt on your keyboard and you will observe a small question mark on the footer of the cursor, which means that the element inspector has been activated. And once it has been activated, you can then click on any of the fields which you want to inspect. So in my case, it's customer. So after selecting the field, element properties dialog box will be presented, where you can find information for that particular element. So you can see the data class, data field, the view name, business logic, and also customize by selecting the project to which you want to append these changes. All right, so this completes with the first tool which I want to present. Let's now talk about the second tool, which is an extremely used tool inside Acumatica, which is the DAX schema browser. So as we know that everything in Acumatica is stored inside database, but it cannot be accessed from the database directly. We use data access classes to access the data fields, and the the DAX schema browser helps us to provide the information related to DAX and the relationships with other DAX. So this is how the DAX schema browser looks like. And let's now see how we can access DAX schema browser from the instance. The first way to access DAX schema browser is using the URL. So the first part of the URL is the instance name, followed by DAX browser keyword. So this is how the DAX schema browser looks like. This is the search window, where the search bar, where you can write the DAC name, or you can also choose from these namespaces the DAC which you want to investigate. The second way is to use the element properties dialog box. So you can click on the data class, which is presented as a hyperlink. So let's say if we want to know more about SO order DAC, we can click on the hyperlink provided in element properties. So here, this is the part which provides information about SO order DAC. It says that it is customized and also provides information like the namespace, primary screen, and customizations. The most important section of the DAX schema browser is the fields. Here we can see all the fields contained inside this DAC, and additional information is also mentioned against that field. For example, if it is an obsolete field and non-existent in DB, and so on. You can also view the data type of the field and the display name which is presented on the UI form, and also the foreign reference, if any. There are two more sections, which is the incoming references and outgoing references. As the name says, the incoming references, here you can view the DAGs that reference the selected DAG. Likewise, in outgoing references, you can see all the DAGs which the SO order DAG is referencing. All right, let's now go back and talk about the third tool, which is Source Code Explorer. One of the most loved features of Acumatica is its transparency and the fact that users have the ability to view the source code of almost every screen. So you can see the source code of a graph, of any data access class, and also ASPX code of any page. So there are two ways to do this. The first way is by using the element properties dialog box. So you can click on actions and choose to view the ASPX source or view the business logic source or data class source from here. You can also go to the source code inquiry form where you can find the source code for ASPX page. So you can select the screen ID here to view the ASPX source. For any graph, you can select the graph here in business logic tab. For data access classes, you can select the table name. And if you have any particular keyword, you can type it here for the system to find all related references. And also, you can download the website by clicking on this button, and it will be downloaded as a zip file and sent to the client, which is localhost in my case here. All right, so let's now talk about the next tool, which is the trace window. In most cases, the first place where users check to investigate a problem is the standard Acumatica trace. The trace log is embedded within Acumatica, and it shows the list of errors or information or warnings if you have any. So let's see this. Let me try to create shipment for a sales order where I don't have any quantity. And let's try to get an error so as to see the trace. A couple of things about trace. So here we can go to tools and click on trace to find more information about that error. So a couple of things about trace, that it is different for every screen. So as you can see, that the trace which I had for my sales order form had the session number as 95. But if you try to find the trace for any other screen, the session number would be different and the trace would also be different. And there are limited number of messages which we show here so as to not to overload the user with non-relevant information, and this is configurable. All right, so let's, this is how we can log messages, log error, information, or warnings in Acumatica. You can use pxtrace static class of Acumatica to do so. So you can use write error method to write the error messages. All right, so this completes with the first part. Let's now talk about some tools which are highly used in performance monitoring. The first tool which I want to talk about is the license monitoring console. So if you work with Acumatica REST APIs, you might have come across the API login limit exceeded error, which looks something like this. And in case of such an error, we might need to review the license restrictions which have been applied on the Acumatica instance. And that can be done by using the license monitoring console screen, which looks like this. Let's quickly check what all options do we have on the license monitoring console screen. You can open this screen by typing license monitoring console in the search box. So the first tab provides information about the license which has been applied on the instance. So for example, here I can see the status of my license, which is invalid because this is my local host. You could have various values like valid, revoked, or expires soon, depending on the license status. You can also view the license tier here, along with some more information based on your license, like monthly number of commercial transactions, and also some recommended maximums, and most importantly, the system constraints. The second tab, which is statistics. So on this tab, you can see detailed statistics of system resource by month and by date. And if any of these parameters exceed, you can see the warnings here in warnings tab. The last tab, which is constraint history. This is used to view daily statistics for constraints like fixed assets and business accounts. For example, if we want to see the employees paid by month, those would be mentioned here. And this is specified, this is divided by tenants, and it is one line per tenant per day, like this. All right, so let's now talk about the next very powerful tool for troubleshooting, which is Request Profiler. Request Profiler is an embedded tool which is used to troubleshoot performance-related issues in Acumatica or Acumatica framework-based applications. We can use Request Profiler for various purposes. The first one is to monitor time and memory. Then you can also analyze the time needed for any SQL query which runs on the system. And lastly, it is used to obtain information about exceptions on that have occurred in Acumatica ERP instance. So let's go and check the request profiler. So how we usually use a request profiler while troubleshooting is that we have certain requests which are saved by the system in the database. By refreshing results, we can see the latest requests come in. And then we can use clear log to clear all these requests. And after we have cleared log, we usually go to the screen to replicate the issue. And then we can analyze the requests which have been made by the system. So this is one very powerful way to troubleshoot any errors which have occurred in the system. So in SQL tab, you can see all the SQL queries which have been logged by the system, and you can click on the statement ID hyperlink to view the SQL query, and you can also run it in your SQL Server Management Studio to analyze and to see where the results are not coming correctly. All right, so by default, we have the default logging checkbox checked, but if you have any specific requirements for logging, you can make use of log requests and provide values in these filters. And you can log SQL requests by checking this checkbox and providing filter values here. And we also have the ability to log exceptions and log events. Additionally, you can see exceptions caused by the system here, and also the whole event log generated by the system while you were performing any action. All right, so this is about Request Profiler. Let's now talk about the next screen, which is System Monitor. So as you can see that there are various options on the screen, which is running processes, active users, resource usage, system events, and requests in progress. So this form is used to monitor and maintain running processes, active users, and resource usage in Acumatica ERP. So on this form, an administrator can interrupt the session of any user, and you can also find all the processes which are taking a lot of resources and which are opening a lot of sessions, and you can manually stop those processes when needed. This form is really helpful as a part of system monitoring, especially when any performance related issues arise. Let's now talk about the last form, which is System Queues Monitor. So as the name suggests, system queues. So this screen is used to monitor all the queues within Acumatica. So you can monitor the statuses of push notification queue, business events queue, and commerce queue. Inside these, you can find various options, like for each of these, you can see the queue name, the status, and if the processing performance is okay, you can find messages in case of if there are any errors, and you can see the queue size And you also have the ability to clear the queue and restart the dispatcher if there is any overflow. And there are two tabs here. The first one is errors. So here you can see all the errors when the push notification queue is being processed. And then on settings, you can define various settings like the processing time threshold, number of records in detail log. So this by default, the value of processing time threshold is 30 seconds. And when you want to see the details here, at present, there are 100 records, but you can change it as per your troubleshooting requirements. So this completes with the system queues monitor screen, which is widely used to monitor push notifications queue. And let's consolidate what we learned today. So we focused on Acumatica debugging tools and learned Inspect Element and DAC Schema Browser, Source Code Explorer, and the trace window. Additionally, we looked at 4 screens in Acumatica, which are used for performance monitoring. I highly recommend to monitor these screens or to check these screens periodically to see how the system is performing. For resources, I recommend you to check Acumatica Help, which is highly useful for anyone starting to work with these screens. The help articles have details on each of these fields available on the forms which we discussed. So with this, I thank all of you for listening to me, and I'll hand over to Evgeny to talk about some advanced tools now. Thank you.
Great. So, hi everyone. My name is Evgeny Afanasyev. I'm a technical account manager at Acumatica, and today I would like to share some thoughts about the automated deployment and management of Acumatica instances. Right. You may need to install a new Acumatica ERP instance when it's another major version is released, or to have a separated instance as a development environment for specific customer, or maybe some other reason. And today I'm going to share some insights about how you can automate the process of Acumatica deployment, preparation of customization package, its publishing and cleanup afterwards. Right. I will be mostly concentrating on its application for continuous integration and testing. But this process or some of its steps, maybe it could be really useful in other tasks you can face as a developer or quality assurance engineer. So then first, let's see why it's not always the best idea to have a single Acumatica instance and reuse it for testing of different version of your solution. So most important point here is that the changes done on the database side during your publishing won't be reverted when you unpublishing, right? So sounds confusing, but for example, if you have once published a customization that creates a custom table or column, it will work. It will remain in the database after you unpublishing. So in case you forget to include the schema into the next release of your product, it will still work fine on your test instance, but it will fail on a customer instance, right? That's what we want to avoid. Second thing here is that Acumatica actually skips the changes on database if they were already applied before, as you can see here on the slide. So if you have, for example, modified a generic inquiry or endpoint and even updated your customization project accordingly, then this when you publish this package on the test instance, the changes won't apply if the name of this item you've changed matching those which are currently on the instance, right? Unless, of course, you'll use publish with cleanup option, but we might not always think about this, right? And surely we might have a customization plugin in place that can encapsulate virtually any business logic. And once published, the results of its execution will remain in the database and maybe even in a file system. We don't know. So maybe another point, maybe not often thought of, if you develop and manage several solutions with some customer-specific features and maybe specific data sets for different Acumatica version, you can also have a staging environment for each of the setup, etc. This could easily come to quite substantial number of gigabytes, and you would need to review and manage those setups time to time. Okay, so we see the problem here. So what can be done about this? So I would suggest introducing a one-time use Acumatica instance into your process. So once your solution has changed and ready for release or for testing, the Acumatica instance should be deployed with needed data set or specific initial settings. Then your customization project can be built, if not ready yet, and published on this instance. And after all is done, you can run your automated test SDK tests. Maybe the instance could be given to QA team to perform some manual checks, etc. And after having the results, whether they're good or not, the instance should be dropped and all data removed. So on this cycle, basically should be repeated when you're performing tests for the next release of your solution before you giving it out. So this seems, this seems to be simple. Yeah, and let's look at the Acumatica deployment. And if you have installed Acumatica ERP manually before, you know that it would be quite a laborious process to do all this cycle manually all the time. So let's check what we can do to automate this. So the steps I suggest would repeat the manual process. So first we would need to download Acumatica installer as an MSI file. We would use builds.acumatica.com. Then instead of actually installing the Acumatica configuration wizard on our system, as we are usually doing when we installing it manually, we will unpack the installer and using Windows built-in tool, so-called MSI exec tool, and the syntax you see here. So basically, we're just calling this tool with some parameters. We sending specifying the path to our Acumatica ERP MSI installer, and as a target directory, we are specifying the path where we would like to put the content of this installer, right? And that finally gives us an access to Acumatica configuration wizard without a previous installation. It's presented as a ac.exe tool that's having a really great command line interface. And this will allow us to manage Acumatica instance from command line, and that could be really greatly used during the automation. So let's check those steps on a system. So let me quickly navigate to our tab here. So I said that downloads, we will, let's start with downloads. So I navigate to builds.acumatica.com. So this is the place where we, after release, all Acumatica installers will go. And this is Amazon S3, so it's Amazon simple storage service. It's having a really great native API itself, and there are a lot of repositories, official and semi-official with examples. So you can use the native API actually to navigate through those so-called buckets and to find the installer you would like to. Also, if you know, for example, a major release, let's say wants to install the old 20R1 version, right? I just can compile the link myself by removing this index.html from here. And I'm getting a nicely formatted XML that I can parse. And once I find Acumatica ERP install key, right, with the build 20.100.0.0.95, it's okay with me. So I just place this straight after the domain declaration. And here I go, I have my link to my MSI package. I won't download it. So what's next? So I've said about the extraction of this MSI package using MSI exec tool. I've did it before. We have this content of the MSI installer here in Acumatica ERP folder. What's most interesting for us here is a data directory where we have our AC tool, right? So just by calling this AC tool and passing the parameters which we have, which we have documented, listed on our help, we can deploy Acumatica instance from the command line, right? We have also a list of all possible parameters and values that you can use here in order to configure the future instance. Okay, so once we done with installation of Acumatica, it's now time to have a customization package ready. And for this, we will use PX command line tool that is distributed with every Acumatica ERP installation. So this tool is there to build a customization package out of the files that were exported from a customization project. So the tool, it could be called and some needed argument passed, like input directory and the folder where the project is saved, as well as the output directory where you would like your customization package zip, like a zip file to be placed. Yeah, and here please note that the content of customization project might not only be exported as a customization package, like basically this commonly known zip that we give to our customers and VARs, but also as a set of files, right? This is very convenient if you would like to keep the Acumatica customization project items like generic inquiries or sitemaps in the folder under source control together with source code of your business logic. And this keeping this together not only enables you to track the changes, but it's also a prerequisite to use PX command line tool. And this folder in this in argument is actually the place where you're exporting this. I'll show you just in a second. So there is several limitations for PX command line tool, like you need to have a running instance of Acumatica for that. And that is why I've included the preparing package after the instance of it, the instances set, right? Which sounds a little bit unlogical maybe. And if you're looking for a maybe more ubiquitous and universal solution, I'd highly recommend you to join tomorrow's session on continuous integration and continuous development by Gabriel Michaud. He would share even more insights on this matter. But today, let's stay with the command line tool. And I just would like to show you another useful example where this tool can be used. So first, let's check where we can find this tool. So, so this is basically a folder where the Acumatica is placed. I don't know how to put this thing away. Yeah, where Acumatica site is deployed. And in the build folder, when we just go and quiet down to PX command line here, we'll see this tool. So basically it's in every instance with, right? So you just can have it. So let's check on our customization project here. I've prepared the demo project. We have here some sitemap, endpoints, files with a page and a compiled DLL, as well as a code item. Please remember to keep your customization plugins as a code item and not to compile it to DLL. I'll touch it a little bit later. Yeah, and here we have this source control button and the option to save project to the folder, right? So once you click it, it will be exported in a file base. So all files will be exported as files like this, our DLL in the bin, right? And in the project, we will see all the other items like generic inquiries and endpoints, etc., stored as XML, right? So you might be noticed that this folder is under the source control, right? And it is together with some Acumatica, some Visual Studio solution, right? Some Acumatica solution here with business logic. So why it is placed so, right? So let's look at the project itself. It's a quite dummy, useless project, right? Just to demonstrate you the trick with this px command line tool. So once we navigate to properties, you'll see that we have a post-build event specified here that basically after the successful build of our source code of our business logic, we have like as a result is a DLL. This DLL will be placed, will be copied into the demo project customization bin folder, there where we exported initially our customization project from Acumatica Web UI, right? And after that, we are calling our command line exec tool with passing as a parameter first this folder where our customization is exported with exchange DLL, as well as output parameter where we would like to have our customization project, customization package already out, right? So basically when we click here on start, or you have some kind of building process implemented, when we just change the source code, and then the result, we don't need to play around with DLLs and put them in customization package. The customization package will be placed itself like as specified in script. I won't run it now to demo because it takes some time. Okay, and yeah, the good thing, we have this project also pushed on GitHub, so please have a look and try it out. And all those arguments that you can use for the px command line tool are specified in our help article in the official wiki here. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. Now we saw how we could automate the process of the deployment of Acumatica instance and preparing a customization. And the next logical step would be to publish it, right? To import it and to publish the customization package to the installed Acumatica instance. So slightly annoying piece here is that we would, that freshly installed Acumatica has this temporary, setup password. So here we might need to use some direct database query or some other workaround or to remove change password on next login flag from the users table in order to disable this or to set another password, right? So the importing and publishing itself could be done, for example, in the scope of test SDK project. But today I would like to tell you about a special design interface for this, which is a service gate API. So this API is presented in every Acumatica instance and allows us to import and publish customization and do some other specific tasks using SOAP-like web requests. And here you see methods that you would want to use in order to deploy a solution to the freshly installed Acumatica instance. So first we need to upload the package, right? By sending the package name and the content of it in the form of the byte array, right? And then we can publish one or several customization packages by specifying the name of already existing uploaded package and whether or not we would like to have currently published packages published as well. And here a short trick for multi-tenant instance. Since 20R2, I believe, we have an extension method where we also can specify the publication options and to define tenants where customization should be published. So I've prepared a small example for you. It is basically a very small and simple service gate client that will enable you to log into Acumatica instance, right, to upload the package and publish one or several packages here. So it's just all in one gist here, and the reference will be shared after. We're also having kind of decent documentation on that in our wiki, and that's why I won't go much deeper on this matter. And especially tomorrow, Gabriel will share some more interesting stuff regarding Service Gate and how he uses it in his process. I just would like to add a couple of notes here. So as I mentioned before, if you have a customization plugin in your solution, it might not work during the publishing the way you expect it. If customization plugin compiled in the DLL, right? So please remember to keep customization plugin as a code item in customization project, right? And the second note, which is kind of relieving, Service Gate API as a screen-based sooner or later will be deprecated. And in Acumatica 22R2, we already have a new REST interface that will cover this functionality. So please read the release notes for 22R2 preview 1, which is already on the builds.acumatica.com. So, and we are not talking about actual testing today, as there was already quite a lot of said. But once testing is done, we might want to delete the Acumatica instance, right? This might look easy as Acumatica like using Acumatica configuration wizard, but in fact, it leaves behind quite some data. For example, it's mostly remove just site files and virtual directory, and nothing really more. And if you create and remove instances frequently enough, you will want to remove all the parts of instances that no longer be used. For first thing you might think of is a database, right? That's left over, but there are quite a few other items that you would need to take care of, right? Like temporary ISP files, even the registry records. There are quite a few things left behind. So it looks quite some effort, right, to automate all this, all those steps with downloading, installation, and full deletion of Acumatica. And you know, guess what? Right. Let me. Yeah. So. You don't have to do it from scratch, right? We have prepared a working solution that can do all that, right? So you can try to use it as is, or even better, you take the bits and pieces from that and adjust it to suit your own process. So this is an example solution, right, that can navigate you across existing Acumatica builds, installed Acumatica just by simple call. You just can like install 20R2, it's take the latest build and install it, nothing else needed. And as well as delete the, like entirely delete installed one's instance. And please be careful with the last option here, not to remove more than you wanted though. So, and all those documentation and source code I've shown today is publicly available on GitHub.